We've come a long way together over the last year. Now we need everybody, we need you to get vaccinated and help put COVID behind us once and for all. It's time for everyone to say they've rolled up their sleeves and gotten their vaccinations. COVID vaccines are safe and effective. Everyone in the Benjamin family has now been vaccinated, even our youngest. Just like we've done, and just like so many others across the Midlands, it is important to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your community. Once you've gotten fully vaccinated, you'll know you've done your part in helping everyone get safely back together again. Take a look, see how easy that was. Vaccinations are free and available from great community partners all across the Midlands. Getting our city and all of our communities back to normal is almost within reach. We're almost there. This is your shot, Columbia.
Coping with COVID and In It Together present Wellness Wednesday, brought to you by the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina and DHEC's Division of Diabetes and Heart Disease Management.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.
Happy Wednesday. It is Wellness Wednesday, and I'm Tre Tailor, and thank you so much for joining us for Wellness Wednesday from the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina and In It Together XSC. 8 million Americans are experiencing PTSD. Many of these are not veterans. Are you surprised? Well, think about just the last year of COVID, racial injustice, and all of the stress that was brought about because of that. Then mix in just normal job, home, family, and unresolved pain from your past, and PTSD may sound more common than you may have first thought. But we're talking about that today and alternative ways to treat it. It's Wellness Wednesday on Coping with COVID, and Tina Phillips with No Shame Counseling and Reiki join us today. We're going to have a great conversation. I said it right, Reiki.
You did.
And also Michelle Harris. She is a DHEC employee and also a Reiki patient. Thank you, ladies. I said it again twice. Good. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us today on Coping with COVID. We appreciate you and look forward to a great conversation.
Thanks for having me. So good to see you, and so good to see you as well, Michelle.
Yes, great to see you again, and I can't wait, Tre, to talk about Reiki.
Yeah. As long as you keep saying it for me, we'll be straight.
We're in it together.
We'll be right back with these ladies coming up next. But first, your COVID community updates. South Carolina Senator Tim Scott has launched his re-election campaign. The North Charleston Republican says he's running to get the Senate back to the good old days of former President Trump. He says he wants to remain in office to keep President Biden in check. This will be his last Senate campaign, he says, but he hasn't said if he's considering a presidential run. The South Carolina Department of Education announced a $20 million partnership with the South Carolina Arts Commission. The initiative will use proven arts-based procedures to help public school students with pandemic-related learning loss. Now, South Carolina received $2.1 billion to help the state's elementary and secondary schools. The remaining funds will focus on summer and after-school programs. And this just in, Bill Cosby's prison sentence has been overturned. That's right. He could be released from prison at any moment. We'll have more details become available, but the news just came out right before we went on the air. I'm Tre Tailor, and you're watching a Wellness Wednesday. In It Together SC and the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID. Listen, if you want more information about COVID testing and also COVID vaccination, visit scdhec.gov for an update list of times, dates, and location for COVID testings in and around South Carolina, and of course, vaccinations. We will actually be scrolling information about all of that and more vaccine and COVID-related information throughout the show, so please check the bottom of the screen. Now, speaking of COVID vaccinations, COVID vaccines are being held at Lexington Medical Center. You can check the information on the screen for that. Now, if you are a veteran, all vets' COVID vaccinations will be handled by the VA. Kroger pharmacies are offering the COVID vaccination. Again, check the screen for details. And also CVS is taking care of COVID vaccinations, not only at their stores, but also at the Target stores that have CVS's. Online registration for seniors from Get Set Up. You make sure you check that information out. You can visit that website and also call Get Set Up for more information about COVID vaccinations if you need help setting your appointments up. You can get free rides from the Comet to your COVID vaccination. And we learned last week when the folks from the Comet came on, they're also offering COVID vaccinations at the Comet main bus station on the corner of Sumter and Laurel Streets in South Carolina. Now, you've got until 4 o'clock today to head to Drew Wellness Center in Columbia, South Carolina. They are one of the City of Columbia and Lexington Medical Center sites for COVID vaccinations. And that's also one of the locations that you can not only get your COVID vaccination, but while you're doing it, you can register for 2 round-trip first-class airline tickets from American Airlines. Visit ResilientColumbiaSC.com for more information on those COVID vaccination sites. We are also offering the free registration to get 2 round-trip airline tickets first class. That's good. Now, as far as more benefits from COVID, funeral expenses. If you know someone who has passed away, if you lost someone due to COVID, FEMA is doing COVID funeral expenses reimbursement. You can see that information on the screen. And Richland County SC.gov still has their bill assistance program. Also, Dominion Energy and SC Housing has a bill payment assistance program. And the City of Columbia is offering a 6-month payment plan for water bills and payment assistance up to 75%. The Affordable Care Act open enrollment is going on until August 15th. That means not only can you register for insurance, but also, if you have insurance, make sure you check it out because there are some additional subsidies. And the South Carolina Department of Mental Health launched SC Hopes to actually help people cope with COVID. So if you are having some anxiety and some stress and need some information, visit SC Hopes. I'm Tre Tailor. Thank you so much for joining us for Coping with COVID. In It Together SC and the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID. I want to say hi to Betty Fisher. She says hi to everyone. Also, Renee Nelson. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. Listen, if we are streaming live on the In It Together Facebook page. If you're watching, hello, we're so glad to have you. Don't forget to go over there and hit like, share, and follow and find out all of the great information and resources available on diabetes prevention programs and more on the In It Together Facebook page. They also have a website. Also, we're streaming live on the Tailor Made production page. That's the home of Coping with COVID. Please go over there again, hit like, follow, and share. So not only you can get notifications as to when you can watch Coping with COVID, which is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 2 p.m. And then first Monday with George Wallace. You can also get all of your COVID-related updates. We also are streaming live on YouTube. I want to say hi to all of you YouTubers. Thank you so much for joining us. And also we have a presence on Instagram and on Twitter. Listen, post and share this information out so we can get the message to the masses because this is such an important conversation to have about PTSD. It's something that most people associate with veterans, those who served in the armed forces or went to war. But post-traumatic stress disorder can be found in anyone. All you have to do is experience some type of stress. And with many people experiencing the effects of COVID and so much more, people have developed the disorder. So we're talking today about alternative ways to deal with your PTSD. Tina Phillips with No Shame Counseling and Reiki joins us today to discuss Reiki. Tina, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Tre. Good to see you again.
Absolutely. So great to see you too. Let's talk a little bit about what PTSD is.
Well, basically what it is when you're thinking about trauma, right? And a traumatic event it's very individualized. So it's really based on what you experience as trauma. So for some people, a traumatic experience can be something big, like you were talking about with veterans. It can be like, oh, I went to war. Trauma can also be, I had a fender bender. Right. And a lot of times we don't consider that. So there are a lot of things that are traumatic. If you've ever lost a child, that's a very traumatic experience while the child was in utero. Some people may say, but you were only pregnant for 2 weeks. It does not matter. It can be a traumatic experience. Things like infidelity. These are things that a lot of times are outside of the box that we don't really consider the masses usually as traumatic events. But how do you know you have PTSD? Basically, it's after the traumatic event is over, right? So we're talking months after the event is over. And then there's a stress that happens because of the traumatic event, right? So this typically means that we are having a hard time moving beyond that traumatic event. Our brain gets stuck in that space and we're no longer able to function the way that we used to. So what happens is our body still or our brain really still thinks we're still in that moment. We're still in that time frame when someone notified us that our loved one died. We're still in the time frame of when we got robbed. We're still in the time frame of when we had the really bad accident. All of these things are there. Our brain is telling our body, you're still there. So what happens? We stay like this, right? So we are in a state of, we relive the incident. So this is where we're thinking about it all the time, or we try to avoid thinking about it all the time because we're afraid of what happens and the feelings that come up when we do. Also, it's when we stay in a state of hyperarousal. So that means basically, this is a lot of times. So the 4th of July is coming up this weekend. And so when we think about veterans, a lot of times we'll say, oh, when the
fireworks. Yeah.
So that would be a hyper arousal symptom. So when they hear the fireworks, it's a trigger. And so they, right? All of a sudden, I'm really scared. I'm really nervous. But hyperarousal can look like lots of different things. It can mean I'm sweating profusely. It means I'm trembling. I'm scared. Somebody comes up and says, "Hey," and it's just really, really over the top, different reaction and response than what we normally would have. So, and it's got to be a combination of the 4 symptoms, right? So the reliving or re-experiencing the event, hyperarousal. So this is when we have the physical changes that happen. And it's the change in our mood and how we feel. And then also it's going to be the avoidance. So this is when we try to avoid thoughts, feeling, or any sort of reminders of the trauma, right? So what can be a trigger? It can be anything. It can be a cologne or a perfume. When I was working with sexual assault survivors, a lot of times if they smelled certain things, it doesn't even have to be like a person scent. It can be an air freshener. Sometimes that can trigger a memory of when
Yeah.
So that can be, you get brought into a state of hyperarousal. And then a lot of times what happens is that will trigger a shift in our mood and also our emotions. And we start reliving the trauma. And then a lot of times what we'll try to do to cover that up is avoid. So that's how that cycle of all 4 of those things kind of comes into play. The issue is traumatic things happen. Every single human being is going to experience traumatic events at some point in their life, if not several, right? Most of them do. But the PTSD actually happens. It's when our brain is stuck in that space, and we're talking months later, 6 months later, we still are stuck in that space. We have not been able to move beyond it. So we're still having the sleeping issues. We're still having the avoidance and the mood and emotion issues. That's what we're looking at.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting. I was reading something today, doing studies, about for the show, and I read something that says it's not so much that you can't get over something; it's that something can't get over you. Mm-hmm. It's not that you can't release the stress; the stress won't release you. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was so interesting. I want to thank everyone for watching Wellness Wednesday. In It Together SC and the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID. I'm Tre Tailor. We're talking to Tina Phillips with No Shame Counseling and Reiki, and we're talking about PTSD and alternative forms of treatment. Gary Hunter, thanks for watching. He says, great show. Keep up the good news coming from the informative information coming. Matthias Copeland says, my uncle is triggered by fireworks. And he said it's a lot for vets. Yeah. And then Joel Davis says that he has it. Joel, if you would like to share the origin of your PTSD, we would love to hear from you if you want to do that. And the Mickey Copeland says the smell of sulfur when you were talking about different things that bring it up. Now, I also read, Tina, that a lot of times in women, that the number one cause for PTSD in women is sexual assault.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And when you think about it, for women, 1 in 3 women have been sexually assaulted. And a lot of times that's before the age of 18. They've had that experience. So when you're thinking about, molestation, or even if it's another kind of scary experience surrounding sex. And then later on in life, there are lots of other sexual experiences that people have that are very traumatic. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't have to be like a stranger assault. A lot of times we think it's got to be the scary guy around the corner. It can be, I really wasn't into having sex and I felt pressured into doing it by my partner who I choose. And that can be a traumatic event for someone. It does typically happen a lot for women, and then also for, especially in the African American and the Black community, we experience sexual assault at twice the amount of white women. And then Black children in foster care tend to experience sexual assault 10 times more.
Oh my goodness.
So it is very prevalent in our community, especially. And yes, women tend to have PTSD a lot more, a lot of times because when you think about how men tend to channel their feelings and experience, it is outward, right? So they're able to release some things externally, a lot of times through anger, but sometimes it's also through they implode, right? But most of the time with women, we will stuff and we keep stuffing and we don't really deal with things the way that we probably need to. And we don't address our needs and concerns because in our society, we have kind of been taught and reared usually that someone else's needs are more important than our own.
Yeah. You know what else in the Black community? You don't tell your business.
That's right.
You keep it to yourself, you know?
Well, and if we're honest, a lot of times we've had to do that because we are more likely to talk about so-and-so being this, that, and the third, but we will protect Uncle so-and-so who's a perv. Yeah. We won't talk about that at the family meeting, but we'll talk about what you doing that's wrong. But a lot of times we will brush things under the rug. We have tended to do that in our family system. We are seeing some shift in that. So yay us. We are seeing some shift where we are starting to talk about things. We are starting to access services more and be able to acknowledge the fact that you can't change what you don't acknowledge.
Right. Exactly.
And so we are definitely seeing where we are doing a lot of a greater service to our families and to our children and to each other by saying, sis, you need some help. And also by calling things out, because it does happen a lot in our communities, in our families, in our businesses, and also in our religious sectors. And a lot of times it's just not, we don't talk about it. We keep it on the hush. But I'm here to say it loud.
Yeah. and often we're talking to Tina Phillips with No Shame Counseling and Reiki. And we've been talking about PTSD. Michelle Harris says, what kind of physical complications can PTSD cause on the body, especially if you have a chronic condition? Thank you, Michelle, for your question.
So a lot of times what we see with PTSD, a lot of my clients, so I'm a therapist and I'm also a Reiki practitioner. So what I see a lot of times with clients, we're seeing things like fibromyalgia. Also depression a lot of times causes us to have issues with anxiety. So then we're seeing like racing heart. Some studies have shown that even sometimes cancer can be one of the things that develops as a result of unresolved trauma, as well as issues with breathing. So, one of the things that happens is when we stay in a state of hyperarousal, when you think about the first thing you do when you're scared, and a lot of times we stay there. So a lot of times we're not breathing, and you think about what breathing does for the body in regard to our circulation, in regard to our oxygen levels, and even our brain functioning. So trauma can really affect the body in a lot of ways. And, depression can cause us. So depression is a symptom of PTSD. And so when you think about depression, a lot of times it causes us to have pain in our joints, fatigue, all of those sorts of things. So there are lots of different ways that trauma can show up in the body. Even when you think about things like diabetes and also hypertension, again, these are issues that have to do with our blood and things of that nature. So absolutely, it can have an adverse reaction on our physical bodies for sure.
Wow. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are talking to Tina Phillips. She is with No Shame Counseling and Reiki. And we've been talking about PTSD and alternative forms of treatment. End It Together SC and the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID. Joel Davis says that it affects him. He hates being around a large crowd of people and he has to stay in a lot. Thank you, Joel, so much for your comment. I wanted to ask you, Joel, why are you experiencing PTSD? Are you a veteran, or did you have some type of a trauma early on? So listen, let's talk a little bit because you are a counselor and a Reiki practitioner. Me and this hair, as I'm killing. Listen, I do want to shout out everybody who's saying they love seeing my hair. But this is exactly why you always see a head wrap. So listen, why is Reiki a good form of treatment for PTSD?
Well, Reiki can be a great form of intervention for any type of health, emotional, and also spiritual issue that you may be facing. And so basically what Reiki does just off the bat, right? It's going to, it promotes lots of relaxation. So here at the No Shame office, what we do is we have the Reiki room there's soft music playing. There's aromatherapy that's happening. It's low lighting. And so you get up on the bed. And so a lot of times just off the cuff, you are in a state of relaxation, right? That's a warm eye pillow that's on her eyes. And it's amazing. So that's one of the benefits. But another one of the benefits, when you think about the 7 chakra zones that we have down our bodies, right? So what happens with trauma, what it basically means is that we are afraid that we are going to get seriously hurt or that we're going to die. Or we've been informed that someone we love and know has been seriously hurt or that they are going to die. That's what trauma looks like. So what it does, it disturbs our sense of safety. It disturbs our ability to trust in ourselves, that we can keep ourselves safe, that we are worth. It impacts our self-worth, our self-esteem, all of those sorts of things.
Wow.
When you get on the Reiki table, one of the chakra zones is down in your stomach, which is your sacral and also your solar plexus and even your root. And so that's where our safety centers are held. So if there is a blockage because of a traumatic event that happens in one of those chakra zones, you are not flowing as we are created to. We're not flowing well. So what Reiki can do is come in and help those chakra zones to begin flowing properly. And it's an energy healing. So it can help those chakra zones to begin flowing properly or to begin flowing at the rate of speed that is a more comfortable rate of speed, because sometimes we see them where they're real sluggish, or sometimes they are like overactive, and they can also be flowing the opposite direction, right? So they're supposed to flow clockwise.
Right.
They can be going counterclockwise. So that's one of the ways that can help. And a lot of times what it does, we have the opportunity while we're there, because we kind of move out of our own way of ourselves. And so it's a time for those things to come up, and for us to bring a new awareness to those things. And when we clear those different chakra and energy zones, it helps the flow of breathing, of air and oxygen. It also helps the flow of life. It's the life force flow to begin to move more. I'm so sorry. It helps the life force to begin to flow without blockages in our bodies. And so a lot of times what we're feeling is the relaxation for sure. But then a lot of people, when they get off the table, they say, oh, I feel so much lighter.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to let stuff go.
Well, you said a couple of things that I want to get some clarity on, Tina. You mentioned chakras. Tell us what that is. So listen, I know people are like, she cussing? What's she cussing? Where's that going on?
No, cussing. So, not today, not right now anyway.
Right. What is a chakra?
So we have different chakra zones in our body. This is what makes you. And this is what keeps us thriving. So we have a chakra zone that's our crown. We have one that's our third eye. We have our throat, which this is what holds our creativity, and also holds our truth, what we consider truth. So your heart is actually a chakra zone. And then also we have our, like I said, our sacral. This is where things like our willpower, our brain functioning, all those sorts of things are held there. We have our solar plexus. That's where our self-esteem and sense of safety is held. And then we also have our root. That's our identity. That's who you are. So those are your 7 main chakra zones. So again, these are the different points that make you. And they're connected to your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual functioning.
Right. Joel Davis says it's 7 of them. So Joel, you must have done Reiki. I'd love to know what your experience has been. So you mentioned that Reiki is a Japanese form of healing, and it connects with, it has to do with energy.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit more about that so people can understand exactly how, what you're doing when you're doing Reiki, how you're redistributing energy, so to speak.
Yeah, so that's absolutely what it is. So when you think about it, if you were to hold your hands like this, eventually what you will start to feel, you will start to feel almost like a magnetic pull. It's because we all are energy. Everything is energy, right? And so that's science. That's just what science says. And we all vibrate at different frequencies. And so what happens is when they're on the table, there's an energy. Each of our bodies, we have the ability actually to heal. That's a part of what our bodies are created to do. So when you're on the table, what my job is as the Reiki practitioner is to direct your energy to those different chakra zones, right? And those different places in your body. Because sometimes people come in and they'll say, oh, I have some pain in my knee. Okay, well, then we can also direct your energy there, that healing energy to that space so that you can experience the healing and the clearing in that area and in that space in your body. So there are a lot of people that have different questions, views, and sometimes even criticism about Reiki. But when you think about it, if you go to church, when you go up and you ask the pastor to pray for you, where does he put his hands? He or she, where do they put their hands? Or when people come and lay hands on you, it's typically here, which is your third eye. So this connects to spirit. So, and we say in church a lot of times, from the crown of her head to the soles of her feet, right? So that's your crown chakra. Or sometimes they'll put their hand on your throat or your heart. Why do we do that? It's a point of contact because it's very similar. It's the same thing, very similar process. And so it's a point of contact, but there's something that's under there in your body. There's that energy place, that energy force in your body that needs to be healed.
Right.
This is an opportunity when you're on the table for that to happen. So there are some different forms, the hand placements that we utilize in Reiki when we are touching the body. Typically at my practice, because I do champion voice and choice, I touch the head and I touch the feet and ankles. I typically just hover my hands in the hand placement areas, though, right above the body. So I don't actually touch between the neck and the lower half of the body. So that's kind of how that goes. I do have some clients who are okay with that. But like I said, it's very rare that we do that here at No Shame. But it is so there you go. See me touching ankles there in that place. A lot of times us being grounded, feeling grounded comes a lot in our feet. And so there are actually 12 chakra zones, and there are actually way more than that, but 7 main ones that we think about. And even if you think about things like the number, what 7 means, if you come from like a biblical standpoint, or even the number 12, what that number means. So again, there are a lot of great symbolism that really carry across religion. And Reiki is not connected to any specific religion. A lot of times people are like, what is that? And it isn't. So I have pastors who come in who have Reiki. I have people who are more so atheists that come in for Reiki. It's really about you living your best life and living as your highest self. And you deserve that.
Yeah. So as you said, now during the Reiki session, you are, as you said, you're kind of putting your hands in different places to redistribute energy. I know that you didn't do it there, but I know that you also use stones. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there are different stones that come from the earth. I don't put that many on someone's face, but we do have different stones that are meant for different things. So if you think about things like clear quartz, that helps to clear energy fields and also helps to promote clarity in thinking and in the mind. So we use that. We also use like selenite. Selenite is also a clearing stone. And so there are lots of amethyst. There are lots of different types of stones, citrine, and all of them have a different meaning. Very similar to when you go to CVS or any other drugstore, you don't get an Excedrin if you have a stomach ache, right? Yeah. You get Excedrin for a headache. So it's very similar with the stones. So they each have a different meaning, and we put them on. And it's very similar, again, to using what we consider regular medicine here.
Right.
It's very similar. And one thing I always share with people is, if you're willing to trust a Tylenol, why would you not trust this stone that was It was created in the earth. There isn't any chemical that comes to it after that. That's what it was. We get it right out the earth and we put it there. And if it works for you, great. And if it doesn't, great. There's no harm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
In it together, SC and the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID. Today, we are talking to Tina Phillips. She is with No Shame Counseling and Reiki. We're talking about Reiki as an alternative form to help folks with PTSD. Coming up in just a short, we're going to talk with someone who recently had a Reiki session. So we're going to find out from her what her experience was. But before we bring Michelle in after the break, I want to know, how has Reiki affected you? Because I'm sure you've had it too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've had Reiki a few good times, actually. That's how I got into providing it as a service. So I've had a lot of major traumas that have occurred in my life and had some issues with not only PTSD, but also anxiety really severely. And so through a combination of spiritual work at my with my spiritual leader, pastor, and also therapy. I had EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization therapy. And then also I was on medication. And then also Reiki, I've been able to really improve. I probably went from functioning at maybe 20% to now functioning at probably 90%. Yeah, I couldn't drive in the rain. I couldn't drive at night because my anxiety was so severe following a pretty severe car accident. And so that has been one of the things that was very, very instrumental in helping me to just feel more centered, feel more safe, secure. And also what it did, it brought up a lot of issues. Sometimes it might bring up a memory that I could go and process with my therapist that I may not have remembered before I got on the table. I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen. And so that would be something I could utilize in my work with my therapist. So it has been a great help for me. I practice Reiki on myself. And so that is something you can do. I also am, since I'm a master Reiki therapist, I can teach Reiki. So I do have classes as well where I can teach others how to do Reiki. You can do it on your dog or yeah, that was one of the ways.
Well, I want to talk about that when we come back. And I also want to talk a little bit about how it helps people that do have chronic diseases, high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, stuff like that. We're going to come back with Tina Phillips with No Shame Counseling, talk about that. And also Michelle Harris with DHEC, and a Reiki patient is going to join us also to tell us about her experience. That and more coming up next as we continue our conversation about PTSD and alternative treatments. We're talking specifically about Reiki. In it together, SC and the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina present Coping with COVID every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID.
Coping with COVID, updates on the pandemic, and information to help you thrive and survive COVID-19. It's brought to you by SCDHEC. Visit scdhec.gov for an updated list of testing and vaccination sites and info to help protect yourself, your family, and friends from the coronavirus. SCDHEC, healthy people, healthy communities. In it together, SC and the South Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council presenting Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday on Coping with COVID. The City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, helping to meet the needs of small, minority, and women-owned businesses in the City of Columbia. Visit columbiasc.net/OBO. Agape Counseling and Training Services. Call 803-779-2777 for licensed professionals of counselors and social workers helping families, engaged and married couples, and individuals of all ages gain an understanding of all aspects of their lives. If you're having a challenge coping with COVID, visit Agape Counseling and Training Services at agapects.com. The Comet Bus System, a fast, fun, friendly transit system that can take you anywhere you want to go in the Midlands. So don't miss your shot. Catch the Comet and get a free ride to get your COVID vaccine. Visit catchthecomet.gov. Javis Tax Services, South Carolina's premier full-service financial provider with over 20 years of experience. Palmetto Media Connections, connecting media and communities together. And Computers Unique, Dutch Square Mall, Call Daniel for honest, professional, reliable, and knowledgeable computer sales and service. Coping with COVID from SCDHEC, In It Together, the South Carolina Diabetes Advisory Council, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Agape Counseling and Training Services, the Comet Bus System, Palmetto Media Connections, Javis Financial Services, and Computers Unique.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.
The Comet gives me a reliable source of transportation.
It's very convenient to me, and they have wonderful drivers.
It's clean and it builds community. It's fun to meet people.
It makes me feel like really independent. It's just fun.
It's always going to be there and it gets me everywhere I need to go.
We try to ride every single day. Comedy is our livelihood.
Computers, they're a part of our everyday lives, but when they're not working, they're an everyday problem. So call Computers Unique, your everyday solution. 803-351-5821. Is your computer running slow? Won't turn on? Do you need a screen replaced? Or maybe you just need another computer? Well, Computers Unique is your one-stop shop for all your computer needs. They have a wide variety of new and pre-owned PCs, Macs, and tablets. So call Computers Unique, Dutch Square Mall. 803-351-5821. 803-351-5821. You can eat what's good to you and good for you, too.
Yes.
Get the Dash for Southern Soul Cookbook free. All you have to do is ask. It's packed with delicious Southern-style recipes with a healthy twist.
Yummy.
You won't be able to taste the difference, but you will be able to feel the difference.
Yeah.
Inbox your email address to the In It Together or TaylorMade Productions Facebook page, and you'll get it straight to your mailbox. The Dash for Southern-style Cookbook and a Coping with COVID face mask. From In It Together SC, the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina, and Coping with COVID.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.
In It Together SC and the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID. I'm Tre Tailor. Please go over to the In It Together Facebook page and hit like and follow and share this broadcast out so we can expand the conversation about PTSD and alternative forms of treatment, including Reiki. We've been talking about PTSD, and while the condition is typically associated with the military community, of the roughly 8 million people in the United States dealing with the post-traumatic stress disorder, less than half of those are actually veterans. Stress associated with the past, childhood, loss, trauma, and of course, with the twindemic of last year, many people are experiencing PTSD. Unfortunately, it often goes untreated. Many do turn to counseling, and more people are utilizing alternative forms of treatment like Reiki. We've been talking to practitioner Tina Phillips with No Shame Counseling and Reiki. If you just joined us, please watch the replay for all of the great information about Reiki and PTSD that you may have missed. Michelle Harris joins us now. She's Communications and Resource Coordinator for the Division of Diabetes and Heart Disease Management and a Reiki patient. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
Oh, I'm glad to be here and talk about it. And I think it should be added, I'm a new Reiki patient. This was my first session, my very first session. Yeah.
Well, tell me first, Michelle, how did you hear about Reiki?
Oh, I watched this fabulous show called Coping with COVID. So I had heard over the years, I've heard things about chakras and that sort of thing. I can't say that I definitely understood that all of that was connected to Reiki before. So I've heard that word here and there, but I didn't put the whole picture together. I have been the kind of person, though, who liked to listen to spa and very soothing music. I've heard about the singing bowls and things like that. And definitely I'm into aromatherapy and light therapy. I mean, I know that those things are real. So it's bits and pieces of things over the years. And all of this kind of put it all together in one package. Now I understand how things better interconnect.
Right. So that made you become interested in trying it?
It did. However, I will say that I was one of those people who was skeptical, not necessarily about the practice itself, but about practitioners. I was really concerned about, well, how do you know that you're really getting someone who is good at this, who can help you, who is effective?
Right.
And so, to be honest with you, and this is where Wellness Wednesday came in, through our connection with DHEC and supporting the show, and you, Trey, actually connected us with Tina, and just watching her on the show, listening to her talk, knowing that she was also a licensed therapist, because Tina said something earlier that I thought was great, which is if something comes up, you want to be able to deal with it.
Right.
Because we don't want to stuff that back down. We don't want to, in my opinion, eat my feelings back down and do different things like that, whatever we do to kind of cope. I didn't want to do that. So I was very happy to be in a safe space with someone who not only I felt like was very competent in the Reiki practice, but then if something did come to the surface, I could also deal with that with her as a therapist. I thought that was a great combination.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to, we don't want to unfold all of your Reiki business out here.
We ain't got time for all that.
but I do want to know, how was the experience?
It was fantastic. And I've had people ask me that. I had lots of folks with bated breath. Okay, Michelle, what did you think?
Really? All right. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because, listen, and I keep looking, I was like, what is Trey? I'm looking on the table. Oh my gosh. Anyway, that's one of my things I got to unpack.
Well, nobody knew that was you, Michelle, until you just said it.
Listen, who couldn't tell that was me besides? Anyway, whatever. But because I have had massages before and things like that, spa therapy, spa experiences, I was very comfortable in the setting because it is very much like that. The light is very low, candles and soothing music and that sort of thing. So all of that felt very familiar. And, it was a silent experience in the sense that, Tina was not talking with me. She would ask me if she needed me to do something like put up, lift my head or something like that. But other than that, we didn't talk. One of the things that I thought was very interesting is, and this will come as a shock to anyone who knows me, I like to talk a lot. And so being in a silent space, being in just with my thoughts going back and forth, that was a little different. That's not something that we do in this society very much. We have a lot of things that fill the void. So it was wonderful to just be there. I'll tell you, as we moved through the session, because it was about 40 minutes from beginning to end, we chatted a little bit beforehand, but very little. Really, we spoke afterwards. But the session itself was about 40 minutes. And there were times, and Tina said that this was one of the first times that someone had said this, there were times that it felt like it was moving fast. Then there were times that it just felt like the minutes slowed down. And in our microwave society where things are going, constantly, to have a moment expand like that was tremendous. I thought that it was a great experience.
Yeah. What were you looking to get out of it?
So I was looking to find some balance. Because I cope with anxiety. I have a lot of stress. So mine is more in the form of stress, just because I have so many demands and so many things I'm trying to do, and I'm pulled in so many different directions. So I was hoping to have a quiet moment that gave me some balance. I'm aware of the fact that I bring energy to a space like we all do. I think if people can think about, there are some people that'll walk in a room and they'll change the whole tone of that room because they're bringing all kinds of different energies. Whether it's good or bad. So I'm aware that I have energy in a space, but I always feel like it's all over the place. So I was looking to be able to find something that would center it a bit more. What I found was that, and this is something I'll share with Tina, a lasting effect of I slept better afterwards.
Wow.
Because I get into bed whether I sleep or not. I have, I'm at that age where my sleep is already affected by menopause and everything else. So I slept better, and I have felt more grounded as opposed to just having fleeting thoughts all the time.
Wow.
I have felt more grounded.
Wow. Is that a normal reaction, Tina? Is that what she was supposed to feel?
Well, it's never about what someone's supposed to feel. But yes, most people do report that they have much better sleep, that they have a stronger sense of self, that they feel more grounded. And then also we see actually one of the their eating habits even change, hydration, all of those sorts of things tend to improve following Reiki Yep. And Reiki, it works for, or it can be continuing to move throughout your body for 21 days. So you can't come in every week. That's really not the way that the practice was set up. You're supposed to come in about every 21 days, so about every 3 weeks. So, and I do have some patients that come every 3 weeks to the date. I have some who come once a year. I have some who just come once a month. So it's really kind of up to you. But yes, most of my clients, I could pull up all kind of emails that I get a couple of days after where they're like, oh my gosh, or some people are like, I've been like really happy and laughing a lot. Sometimes I get some people who are saying, I feel all the grief that's come back up that I did not feel, when my mother passed away and I didn't grieve her. And now I'm grieving now. But
because it's coming up and coming out.
But it's a cleansing. It's a cleansing time and they needed to get it out. So lots of different, but a lot of times people do say they feel so much more grounded. Definitely they feel that difference in their rest. And then also a lot of stress reduction.
Yeah. I want to talk about, because you talked about stress reduction, and stress is often the main reason people are having high blood pressure, even diabetes, heart disease. So how can this really physically affect someone who has some of these chronic health conditions doing Reiki?
Well, of course, first and foremost, definitely is going to be that stress reduction, right? And just feeling that balance in general. I believe that everything that happens with us physically, a lot of times is a manifestation of things that are happening emotionally and as well as spiritually. They're things that we are storing internally. And I think that a lot of times they manifest physically. So when you're thinking about diabetes, which I'm a former diabetic, no more. But one of the things that you have to look at is a lot of times people end up with things like neuropathy, which when you think about that numbness or that tingling, all sorts of things. So Reiki can absolutely help to benefit those areas. And also, again, when you're looking at the stress reduction, that's also a great way to, and I talked earlier about like hydration and also eating habits. A lot of times we think we're hungry and we're not. We are feeling something internally, right? We're stuffing our feelings, or a lot of times we're hungry for something else that we are not willing or able to give ourselves.
Wow.
So it's a drive. Sometimes it's success. Sometimes it's relationship. We're too afraid. So to feed something in ourselves, we'll use food instead. Right.
Wow.
So food is our cocaine or our heroin or our marijuana. It becomes our drug. So all of those things can be impacted by Reiki. So of course, we do see that was another benefit of Reiki for myself was definitely, like I said, I'm no longer diabetic.
Do you credit it? Do you credit Reiki?
I credit Reiki. I credit a shift in, again, dealing with my trauma. And so when I dealt with the trauma, I was able to get up and walk 2 to 3 miles every day. I was able to eat the way that I needed to eat. That was best for my body. And also start giving myself what I needed. A lot of times we are not even in tune with what we need or what we want. Because what trauma does also, it disconnects our brain from our bodies.
Right.
And so sometimes we don't even know what it is. This is when you start asking people, what do you want to eat? I don't know.
Right.
It's not always just, sometimes it's just literally, I don't know. Or sometimes it's, I'm afraid that if I say what I want, it's not what you want. And there's going to be a rejection process. There's so much that goes into everyday decisions that we make or don't make and what we're willing to give ourselves or not give ourselves. Right. And so a lot of us have this shame, which is why my company is called No Shame. We have this shame mindset, not necessarily that I've done something bad, but I am bad. I am flawed. I am not worthy. And so we treat ourselves accordingly. So a lot of times if we deal with some of the emotional things that happen, we do see that physical ailments tend to decrease, or we are able to cope with them better. We are able to follow the directions of the medical world because I'm worth it. I want to live. I'm living and not just live here. I can live.
I can live my best life.
And one of the things that I knew going into this trade, but even listening to Tina talk about it now, and you saw it even in me, in my discomfort at showing me, is as women, we are immediately, if critical of ourselves. Will that mirror, we look in the mirror, oh, my face doesn't look like, oh, my hair's not, oh, my body is not, and it's so automatic until if we were to try to add up all of the negative things that we say to ourselves, forget what somebody else said. But if we were to, thank you for helping me deal with that, Trey. Listen,
that's why I thought I would play it.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. But no, I have, and the thing about it is, because it's so automatic, my thought process is, what can I do to reverse that? Because I'm glad that I know I'm recognizing now that it's there, those negative thoughts, but what can I do to reverse that? And so that's where I believe that the Reiki session was extremely helpful in, again, just centering, giving me some space to think about what I might need, and many times if you point out something that is missing or broken or whatever, it's just as Tina said, it's a shameful thing. Oh gosh, I'm missing that. Versus, oh, okay, I'm recognizing that I need that. Let me see how to get that.
Yeah.
Ask for it.
Yeah.
That's usually the big piece, is asking for it.
Well,
Because if I ask for something, it's an admission that I cannot get it for myself.
Right.
So a lot of times we begin thinking that we are weak, or that we are inadequate. So again, it always taps right back into that shame factor, which is why I'm the kind lady. Be kind to yourself, because it's about honesty, but also about that compassionate care. And you have to have both for yourself. So I'm not going to be careful with what you say to yourself about yourself, right? Just like Michelle was talking about, we are our own worst critics. And if we look at what the tape is, the ticker tape that goes through our minds consistently, a lot of us would be like, oh my gosh, I talk to myself like that. Indeed you do.
Right. Because you wouldn't do that to somebody else.
You wouldn't.
Correct.
And most of the time that's why I say be kind to yourself. Now, if you watch, there's a really popular show that comes on and they say be kind to each other. And I don't say that, because most of us were reared to talk nice, even if we're being fake. We're reared to be kind to other people, but we are not reared to be kind to ourselves. So we'll tell the neighbor, you look great, but tell ourselves, oh my gosh, you're so
yes,
all the things. Yeah.
You know what else I'm thinking that just it came to my mind? The other thing is, we hear people say, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but we don't do unto ourselves. Right. Which may be the root of some of the reasons why we hurt people. We know hurt people. So we're hurt. So we're in turn hurting, abusing, using other people. Because we're not alone like ourselves.
We get into that, but really, when you even look at it from either one of the universal truths, right, is to also love your neighbor as yourself.
As yourself, yeah.
I can't love you if I don't love me.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And it's a daily practice. And don't get me wrong, I missed the mark. Before we got on here, I was on and I was like, I don't like my eyebrows today. Right? So I was doing that. And somebody, who I love and trust had to get me on together. You look great, you look beautiful, and I'm gonna need you to talk different to yourself.
Right.
So and also that's what it's also about, is when you start, when you make a commitment to you cannot always change the people around you. You can't change them.
You can't.
You can change who's around you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so you will start finding you will connect with people who vibrate higher, and they will hold you accountable to be your best self. When you say, this is the realm I'm living in, your crowd will change. Absolutely.
Wow. And I was telling someone else, I just said to my daughter is 27, and I said to her the other day, I said, let me apologize for any trauma that I have caused you in raising you, because we not realizing it, we traumatize our poor children. And I think about the fact that many times, we were raised, that's just how we were raised. And at what point do we start dealing with the trauma? Because some of it is completely unintentional. Our parents loved us; they cared for us. They, so, but
they were doing the best they could do at the time.
With what they
had. Yeah.
But at some point, I need to deal with that trauma, deal with those wounds. One of the things that Tina said to me afterwards was about dealing with some emotional stuff, like going through my divorce and stuff. And I was like, oh, I got to pull that back up. But I do need to look at that, because I didn't fully deal with it.
Right.
I just made do for the time when I was going through it. But you come back to it. The thing that keeps me from being afraid to deal with it is you come back to it at a stronger point. I'm not the same person I was when I got divorced. So now I can deal with some things better than I did back then.
Than you did before. Yeah. Yeah. In It Together, SC and the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina present Wellness Wednesday every Wednesday here on Coping with COVID. I'm Tre Tailor. We're talking to Tina Phillips with No Shame Counseling and Reiki, and also Michelle Harris, who is a patient of Tina's. She just had her first Reiki session today. So we're getting her all fresh and fresh and refreshed.
But it won't be my last. I will be back. I'm counting off my 21 days. Yes.
So Michelle, I want to ask you, who do you think should get Reiki?
Oh my gosh. Frankly, I think it's open for I think everyone is a great candidate, but everyone is not open. So we talked briefly about reasons why Reiki wouldn't work. It's the same kind of reason why counseling wouldn't work. If somebody is not open, if they're so lost in disbelief, if they're so non-trusting that they can't open up, if they're not willing to release, then to me, you should at least try it. But if you go into it so closed, then you're not going to get what you could possibly get out of it. But I think that it's for any age. I just saw a story about children and stress and how much fear there is of catching COVID, the trauma that they've had of missing their classmates. So any age on up. But I definitely think, and I'm a lover of women as far as us, because we are so central to the family unit and so central to society that, and again, as Tina said before, we're the caregivers and we take care of ourselves last. So I definitely think that women, you need to think about doing this for yourself, even if you just have one session just to see if it would work for you. Because if it will work for you, it puts you on a very positive path. And don't be people who are church going, because I love my Jesus. Do not be afraid of this, because so many of the things are principles that go hand in hand with what we already believe.
And that's what you said, Tina. If you think about the laying on of the hands, the praying, all of that.
The meditation,
that's spiritually based.
Absolutely. Listen, I graduated from Oral Roberts University, and my daddy was a preacher, still is a preacher, but was a pastor for 36 years. I go to church most of the time here in Columbia, sometimes here in Columbia. So definitely am very much aware of, the different religious ideas. And also, I invite you, if you have questions or if you have concerns or you're nervous, I invite you to bring that in. Because I think that a lot of times what I have seen for a lot of people is where they've been able to say, oh, okay, this feels actually somewhat similar to some of the things I may have experienced on a spiritual level. But this time I get to be by myself, and have this sort of experience. So I invite you to come in and see what it's like. I invite you to come and ask questions for sure. And I always tell people to try to replace criticism with curiosity. And kind of see and ask your questions and find out what it is that's really nervous, what makes you nervous. A lot of times it's a loss of control.
Yeah. Tina, we have a question that I want to pose before we leave. Gary Hunter says, is it possible that some of us suffer not knowing it when we respond to certain things with our spouses? He says, when we have knowledge or understanding of the results of their behavior, therefore we lash out to stop it. He said a lot in there.
Yeah, that is. A lot of times, again, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. So when I'm doing work with couples, even too, most of the time, one of the first recommendations that I have is that they go to individual counseling, right? And that they go to two separate counselors for that, not me. Because most of the time we need to come into our own awareness about our own traumatic history. Because trauma shows up everywhere in every area of our life. For a lot of people, it's sometimes trauma even shows up as a sexual dysfunction. So when we're looking at erectile dysfunction or also FASD for women, a lot of times that's a result of trauma. When you're thinking about how depression causes you to be moody and irritated, or if you're anxious, and think about it, if you're hyper aroused and you're already like this, yes, you're going to always feel like you're coming off as lashing acting out. One of the trainings that I provide, I have one called Boys in the Hood, and I also have one with my colleague Christian Jackson called Arrested Development. Specifically talks about how trauma impacts Black women and also Black men, and how a lot of times what is considered as angry is not an angry response. It's a trauma response. Because I've been triggered. So yeah, a lot of times our spouse is triggering. And when you think about it, in a marriage, that's where we usually feel safe. And so typically that's where we tend to act out. You think about toddlers, people say, well, when he was with me, he was just fine. He didn't do none of that. Yeah, because he's not as safe with you. He knows he can throw a tantrum with mommy. And tomorrow, mommy's still going to love him. Right. And it's the same thing with our spouse. We will cut up and show out with our spouse. And a lot of times we give them the sludge. We give them the bottom part. Other people won't accept. So yeah, it's something we can do. We're not really aware, but we do need to come into an awareness. And a lot of times there is some reconciliation and some forgiveness that needs to happen, and some owning of our behaviors and our actions that we have to do for sure.
Yeah, thank you, Gary. We were talking to Tina Phillips with No Shame Counseling, Michelle Harris, brand new Reiki patient, and we've been talking about using Reiki as a form of healing, so to speak, for PTSD in any form. And please hit the replay if you're just now joining us, because we've been having a fascinating conversation about first who and what PTSD is, and of course, who can be affected by it and how Reiki can help. If people want more information, Tina's information is on the screen. She is with No Shame Counseling and Reiki. And Tina, Michelle, when I asked Michelle about who should get Reiki, and she talked about a couple of different things, but also children, because you and I talked about children. As young as what age would you do a Reiki session with a child?
I would probably say about 2 or 3. As long as you have to sit still. So they got to be able to sit still. So I can do it on little kids. My sister brought her dog up here last week, and we were able to do Reiki on her dog, and she saw improvement in her dog's behavior. So now I typically don't do just any dog now, y'all. We're not just finna beat the whole zoo. I ain't Dr. Doolittle. I do love dogs. They are special to me. But yeah, we can do little kids as long as they're willing to sit still. I do practice a lot on my niece and nephew. And so it's one of those things where if they can sit still for a little bit, yeah, they can have that done for sure. Even if it's just 5 or 6 minutes, they can have that done. Yeah. And it can be helpful.
Anything else you want to mention about your experience or about Reiki in general, Michelle?
I just think that on the other end of the spectrum, I just feel impressed to tell people it's never too late. Don't think that, oh, well, I'm old and set in my ways now. But no, there's always an opportunity to improve your quality of life.
Right.
It's all about life is all about experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're still here, you still have purpose.
Absolutely.
And you absolutely deserve to live your best healthy life, but you have to go and take it.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you are a counselor, and Michelle alluded to this, because if something does come up, you can handle it.
I got you.
You can talk it out.
I got you. Yeah, for sure. Now, I typically don't have my counseling clients as Reiki clients, but I do have some of my current counseling clients started off as Reiki clients. So that is something. And if not me, I can always refer you out to another great counselor that will suit your needs. That'll be a great fit for you. But yeah, whatever comes up, I got you.
All right. Tina Phillips, No Shame Counseling and Reiki. Michelle Harris with DHEC and Reiki patient. I don't know. Do you call it a patient? I guess you are a patient.
Yeah.
I'm a client. I'm a Reiki client.
Yeah. I don't know.
Reiki believer.
Reiki believer. Yes. She's not only the hair club user, she is a spokesperson.
That's right.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today, and just the open, honest conversation about alternative forms of medicine. We got to keep our mind open to what works. For us, and it's different. We need to give it a chance. Thank you, ladies, so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Trey. Have a good one. Thanks, Michelle.
I'll be seeing you soon, Tina.
All right. Renee Nelson says, thanks for the great information. And Betty Fletcher says, as always, great information. She says, thanks to all of the guests for sharing today. Thank you so much. Listen, if you have a story or initiative that can help someone cope with COVID, please go to the Tailor Made production page on Facebook and inbox me. We would love to feature you on Coping with COVID. If you have a product or service that could help someone cope with COVID, please email copingwithtretailor@gmail.com. copingwithtretailor@gmail.com. You can see that information scrolling on the bottom of the screen. We would love to have you as a proud sponsor of Coping with COVID, just like In It Together SC, the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina, the City of Columbia Office of Business Opportunities, Palmetto Painting Services, Agape Counseling and Training Services, also Computers Unique, Dutch Square Mall, Javis Tax Services, the Comet Bus System, and Palmetto Media Connections. Now, coming up tomorrow, we'll talk to Columbia City Council candidates, Krista Williams, who is vying to represent District 1, and Deidre Stover Matthews, who is an at-large candidate. We'll continue our Black Music Month commemoration Friday, our final series in it with Deanna Williams, the mother of Black Music Month, and also programmer Cy Young, who's worked in several different markets. And then next Wednesday on Wellness Wednesday, join us as we talk about healthy vision. That and more coming up on Coping with COVID. As always, I leave you with a reading from Jesus Calling. And on this June 30th, Jesus is calling you to truth. He says, I am the truth, the one who came to set you free. As the Holy Spirit controls your mind and actions more fully, you become free in me. You are increasingly released to become the one I created you to be. This is a work that I do in you as you yield to my spirit. I can do my best handiwork when you sit in the stillness of my presence, focusing your entire being on me. Let my thoughts burst freely upon your consciousness, stimulating abundant life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. As you follow me, Jesus says, I lead you along paths of newness, ways you have never imagined. Don't worry about what's on the road up ahead. I want you to find security in knowing me. I am the one who died to set you free. That's your Jesus Calling for today, Wellness Wednesday, June 30th. I'm Tre Tailor. Thank you again so much for joining us. I wish you peace, abundant blessings. Stay safe, be careful, get your vaccine, and wear your mask still over your nose and under your chin. We'll see you tomorrow.
Coping with COVID and In It Together present Wellness Wednesday, brought to you by the Diabetes Advisory Council of South Carolina and DHEC's Division of Diabetes and Heart Disease Management.
Coping with COVID with Tre Tailor.